Hey, River Rat here with River Rat's Total Outdoors, and today we are talking about swim jigs. Swim jigs are probably the hottest growing segment of jigs on the market, and it's been that way for 3 or 4 years. There's hundreds of manufacturers of swim jigs, we all know that, and today we're trying to pick out what should be the top of the heap. So I selected some swim jigs off of Tackle Warehouse that caught my eye. And we're going to take a look at them and see how they do. I get asked a lot what sets a swim jig apart from a regular jig. And it's pretty simple and basic. There's basically 3 different kinds of swim jigs. There's your southern style, which this particular swim jig is. The southern style, they have a heavier, beefier hook because southern guys think they need a tuna gear to bring in a 5-pound bass. They also have thicker weed guards and usually a little bit fuller skirt than what is typically referred to as the Wisconsin or the original style swim jig. These swim jigs are set apart by the fact they have a lighter wire hook. Actually, almost every single one of them uses a 32-724 Mustad hook, usually 5-aught. They have a sparse skirt, thinned out, usually 2 pads or less, 44 strands or less. And they also have a thinner diameter weed guard, which this particular one really doesn't, but that would be the original style swim jig. The other style swim jig is typically referred to as the California swim jig. These are basically a flipping jig built into a swim jig. They have the heavy gauge hook, really full skirts, usually 3 strands, 3 pads, 66 strands. They have a thick weed guard, and the typical pointed head, although they're usually a little bit wider. Meant for anything from swimming open water to flipping the nastiest stuff you can get. And that's basically the 3 styles of swim jig. Now, what sets these apart from these? This one in my left hand is obviously the swim jig, and in my right hand is a flipping jig. And the swim jig has a 0 to 30 degree hook. Hook is usually in line with the hook point. The line tie is in line with the hook point. Swept back weed guard and typically a thinner skirt. The flipping jig usually has a 60 to 90 degree hook. You can see this one's flat eye. Streamlined body still for going through cover, and usually a heavy weed guard and a heavy hook. And this is your prototypical, when people say swim jig, this is your prototypical swim jig. Light hook, light weed guard, light skirt, meant to swim through cover, all types of cover. Generally not used as a flipping jig, but they still have a lot of uses, obviously by the market growth, and the popularity of them has just taken off over the last 4 to 5 years. And we'll roll through some different swim jigs and show you the differences. I chose 11 jigs. Just went through Tackle Warehouse and ordered some jigs that caught my eye. Honestly, I haven't fished a lot of other jigs in the last 7 years, typically because I make my own. But I know other manufacturers. I've talked to other manufacturers, and some of them I wanted to check out their stuff, and then there's some that I've never heard of before. And they just stood out to me as, hey, that looks like a really nice jig. Let's get it in and run it through its paces. The first one here that I picked up is a M-Pack Lure Structure swim jig. You can see it's got a different kind of weed guard on it. It's called the Structure Weed Guard. It's a single wire weed guard that's held on by a little piece of rubber on your hook. And when something bites down on it, it's supposed to slide to the side, and you still get a good hookup on it. This particular swim jig, they're southern style swim jig. They have a nice beefy 5-aught Gamakatsu hook. They have a nice wire keeper, stick-on eyes, However, I don't really consider this a swim jig because it does have a 60-degree hook, but they're marketing it as a swim jig, so we'll call it that. That's the M-Pack Lures swim jig, and it's a nice little jig. I'm excited to run it through its paces. And then the second jig we have up is the Talon Lures, and I'm going to have to grab the package because I don't know how to pronounce this. It's the Shibui Yu-Gi-Oh! Swim jig. Talon Lures is pretty famous for naming their jigs that I can't pronounce. This, however, is a really nice swim jig. I'm really enjoying the look of it. It's got really nice paint, 3D eyes. This is also a Southern style swim jig. It's got the nice beefy hook. This looks like a 4-aught hook. It's got a wire keeper in there for your trailer. It is also hand tied. Don't know if you can pick that up at all. It's got nice little copper wire for being hand tied, and it also has a rattle collar, which honestly, rattles are about as useful as a poopy flavored ice cream popsicle on a swim jig, but this has rattle collars, and if you use rattle collars on your swim jigs, or rattles on your swim jigs, I'm sorry to upset you, they're useless on a swim jig. But this one has it on there. It's an extra little feature. I think it's worth nothing, but very nice looking swim jig. The third swim jig is the Booyah swim jig. Actually, the first swim jig maybe one of the first swim jigs I ever threw. This has a 0-degree hook. It's got a really different head design. It's called the planing head. Really nice swept-back weed guard. Really light, so it's kind of a cross between a Southern style swim jig and the original style swim jig, because the Southern style swim jig and original style swim jig. If it was a true Southern swim jig, it would have a heavier weed guard in it, which this one doesn't. As you can see, it also features a rattle, which is useless on a swim jig and just gets in the way. Single color head, nothing flashy. Actually, I think they only have 3-4 colors, and I haven't been impressed by any of the colors. But we'll run this one through its paces too, just because I know it's popular, mainly because of the name. There's nothing that stands out with this jig. Fourth jig that we have for you is a 4x4 Brandon McMillan Signature Series. I know these are pretty popular. They have the trailer keeper on them. It's another Southern style swim jig. It has the thick 5-aught hook, nice weed guard. Also has, a pretty thick skirt on it. It looks like it's about 44 to 50 strands. No eyes. Basically, to me, this is a grass jig. It's being marketed as a swim jig. Typically grass jigs you can swim too, but swim jigs typically they have a little bit more, they have eyes, they have a little bit more put into the paint. This is just a single color paint. Although it looks nice, it's, to me it's just a grass jig, but we'll check that one out. And then we have the Nichols Saber swim jig. Another nice little jig. It's got, it's a Southern style jig. It's got the big 5-aught hook, the big weed guard. Although this one has something special too. You see that little hole in the trailer keeper? What that is it's a hole meant for a toothpick. So, you slide your trailer up on there. We'll just grab something laying around the shop here. So you slide your trailer up on there like this, and then you pin it with through the hole with the toothpick, and you break the toothpick off, and then your trailer keeper can't come off. To me, I love lures that are a little bit different. They do something different to stand out, and to me this stands out. It's something that I've never seen before. I don't know, it could be on all their jigs, it could be on 30 different jigs. It's the first time I've seen it. Like I said, I don't look at a lot of other products. I'm usually concentrating on my own and what my customers want. But this stands out to me, and it's unique. And also the swim jig looks nice. It's not hand-tied, which is a mark against it, but it does have 3D eyes. It's got a nice single color paint job with a lot of fleck in it. It's a nice looking swim jig. And then for last of the Southern style swim jigs, how could we not? The Dirty Jigs. Probably on Tackle Warehouse anyways, the most popular jigs. And for good reason. They're a beautiful jig. It's got not 3D eyes, but it does have stick-on eyes. They have a nice, it's a lead trailer keeper, but it's a nice lead trailer keeper. This is a 1/4 ounce size. Says that it's a 5-aught hook, but I think it's a 4-aught. There's a big discrepancy between the 4-aught and the 5-aught hook on these 30-degree hooks, and this is a 4-aught. The colors are top-notch on all of Dirty Jigs jigs. They have really nice paint, and they're well put together. I like Dirty Jigs. I know it might come as a shock to some of you guys. But they look really nice. And honestly, this is what a lot of jig manufacturers go after when they start manufacturing their own jig, which is sad because they need to come up with their own stuff. But, this is one of the jigs that gets targeted by other jig manufacturers because everybody knows they look so nice. That's the last of the Southern style swim jigs. Now we'll go through the original style. I only chose 3 of them just because there's not a lot of choices. This is the Strike King Tour Grade. I don't really fish a lot of bigger company stuff, especially Strike King, but we won't go into that. This is a nice looking swim jig. It's got the lighter hook, the 32-724 Mustad hook. It's got a really nice wire keeper in it. It's got 3D eyes. The skirt is I don't even know what they call it. It's the Z-Man Chatter style skirt where it doesn't have rear facing strands. It's only got the front strands on it, and it's got the plastic thing that flares them out. Might be the hole-in-one skirt or something it's called, if I remember right. I typically don't like these skirts because they fall apart pretty quick, but they do have a really nice flare to them out of the box. This one is gill color. All the jigs back here are gill colors just because if I'm going to fish them, that's what I'm going to fish. It's got a really nice paint job, really nice 3D eyes, lighter wire weed guard, and lighter hook. Original style. So I'm excited to fish these. I've never fished a Strike King swim jig before. And now we have the NorthStar swim jig. This is the original style, light hook, light weed guard, hand tied, and this particular color is the new gill color. Probably it is the most popular color that I make. I put these skirts together for hours on end, but it's popular for a reason. It works, especially up north. It has a lead keeper on it. Colors on the skirt, there's 6 or 7 different pads of color here. The original swim jig is usually 35 to 40 strands, nice 3D eyes that are glued and epoxied on so they don't come off. I'm not going to go too much into my own stuff just because I know it way too well and I can make it sound better than the rest of them. I don't, know how these other manufacturers, if they glue their eyes on. We're going to find out through testing, but I don't know at this point how they do it. This jig is the OutKast swim jig. It's the original style. It's the light wire. These are really popular. Nice looking jig. They have nice two-tone paint, 3D eyes. I can see one of the eyes is off center on this one. I just chose these right from the store, so there was, it's just how you would get them. Nice weed guard. It's a little bit thicker than a true original swim jig, but it works, and it's got the nice 30-degree pointed hook. Probably about 40 some strands in the skirt. Nice looking jig. Now we're on to the big boys, the California style swim jig. This obviously is Dirty Jig's California swim jig. It was the original California style swim jig. This is a gill color. I can't remember which gill, but it's got the heavier weed guard, although it's fairly soft. These feature a Gamakatsu hook that is a monster. To me, it's I mean, it is what it is. My Minnesota fish don't need this hook. But I know other fish around the country, they can handle this hook. I typically think on hooks this big that the fish feel it a lot and they'll spit the jig a lot quicker. But, I know a ton of people fish these and they catch a lot of fish. But it's typical Dirty Jigs quality. The paint is top notch. They're put together top notch. One thing about these jigs is, it's just the regular lead keeper and he doesn't hand tie them. But I know from experience with Dirty Jigs that this collar area, the ball where the collar sits on regular jigs, it's pretty tiny and it's pretty easy to get that skirt to slide off of there. Years ago, he used to hand tie his stuff, and then he got too busy to hand tie, which I don't fault him. His jigs are popular. So what he did instead of hand tying is he redesigned that ball so that it sticks out further and it's harder for the skirt to come off, which is only one of the reasons that they're hand tied is because the skirts come off. When you hand tie them, they get, a little bit better flare, but they're not hand tied, but they solved one of the problems that we hand tie them for. So this, the collar won't come off, and it does work. So this is the Dirty Jigs California swim jig. The only other swim jig I have in that market is the NorthStar Flip and Swim. Nice quality, heavy weed guard, heavy hook. This is your average hook that you'd find in any other grass jig. This is the collar on it, the keeper. To be honest with you, when I first got the mold in, I was going to change it because I really didn't like this style. But I found out it actually works really good with the trailers that we use on these. And there was no need to change it. So it stayed the same. 66 strand skirt, same thing with the eyes glued and epoxied on, 2, 3, 4, 5 color paint jobs. And that's it. And what we'll do now is we'll bring all these jigs out. We'll test them out for you. Obviously we can't swim them because we live in Minnesota and it's a cold frozen hell in Minnesota. But we will test them. I have some basic tests that I run on my jigs to make sure that the manufacturing process is holding up and everything that we do does what it's supposed to do. And we'll run all these jigs through the same torture tests that, your average NorthStar jig gets ran through. And then we'll rate them and tell you the winner. So stay tuned. Okay, I just got done doing some durability tests, what I can do without, actually catching fish with the jig and really checking them out. Basically, we did a paint durability test, which is pretty simple. We just bounced them off the ground for 10 casts to see what happens. I figure over 10 casts, it kind of equals out to whether the jig was flying higher in the other one, how hard they hit the ground, blah, blah, blah. So I did 10 casts on each jig. There's some pretty surprising results. One of them was actually a couple of them were very disappointing. Go over some of the results. I also, do a little pull test on the skirt just to see how hard it is to get it to come off. If I start breaking strands before it comes off, then it's good to go. It doesn't matter if it's hand tied or if it's got a collar on it. One of the, and I wasn't surprised about this because I know, the owners of Talon Custom Lures put a lot of thought and pride into their jigs. This jig pretty much came through. It's got some, deformities where the lead was deforming from bouncing off the ground. Some scratches. One of the eyes is pretty scratched, but it came through pretty untouched. And you'll see some of the other jigs don't come through nearly as well. So the Talon Lures is a really good durable jig. Just some of the other highlights. No surprise, Booyah took about 1 pound of pressure to pull the skirt off. But actually was very surprised. The paint came through pretty good. It's pretty beat up, but it's still holding on. The Nichols Saber, it still has its eyes. Good thing. But the skirt came off fairly easy. Which for a thinned out skirt on a swim jig, it shouldn't come off that easy, but it did. But, you know, I mean, it happens, especially with rubber banded jigs. So, but, you know, it held both of its eyes. It's got some paint damage on it. But not that bad. The dirty Jigs swim jig came through pretty good. Got some paint damage on it. It's not 3D eyes, it's stick-on eyes. They both held up. The skirt held up to the test. So I was actually pretty, you know, I'm not surprised about that. They do a good job. The Strike King skirt came off almost as quick as the Booyah one. Both eyes came off, no surprise. If you read any reviews on these, I don't even know if they glue the eyes on. I think they just stick them on. But the paint came through fairly well. You'll see a couple chips in there. The other big one was the NorthStar. Paint through came through awesome. Eyes didn't stay on though. Sammy must have put these eyes on because I know I didn't.
Oh yeah, blame it on your son.
Yep. But actually pretty disappointed in this, but I figured I'd be honest. I'm not going to show you a different New Gill swim jig. No surprise, the paint came through. I test all my paint. I am a little surprised, but if you've seen how, and I'm not making an excuse, basically we flip them out onto tar. I stand about 10 feet back in my driveway, flip them out onto the road, and reel them back in, and they got to come over a little curb to get back in the driveway, and it is an eye killer. I'm actually surprised when eyes stay on, but usually mine stay on, so I was kind of surprised by that. The OutKast jig came through really good. Skirt held on, eyes held on, paint chipped up but not, you know, bruised but not broken. I don't even know if I want to show this one. This is a California swim jig. Paint was horrible. It is what it is. Skirt came off, and I'm not going to make an excuse for the skirt, but it is 66 strands with a rubber band. I was kind of surprised it came off as easy as it did, but it did come off. But, you know, that skirt test is, you know, I've had tied jigs come off before, but not very many, but I have had it happen. But the paint was a big surprise. It's out.
It's going to run out.
And then the flippin' swim jig came through unscathed. That's no surprise to me, but I just figured I'd show it. So the big, you know, it is what it is, but that's the toughness test. This will conclude the first half of our swim jig review. We will be testing these jigs out over the course of the summer and updating you on what we think of the jigs. I want to thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe. We'll be putting out more videos in the future. Thank you.